Welcome to Ask a Celebrant, a conversational podcast answering your questions relating to all the commemoration and celebrations of all the chapters of your life. I'm Bernie B, full life celebrant.
And I'm Dinah Liversidge.
Hi everyone and welcome back. Can you believe, Dinah, that we're on episode 4 of Ask a Celebrant? I can't believe it. I don't know where time has been going.
Amazing.
I know, and we spent the first 3 episodes talking about what celebrants do and how you can celebrate love in terms of weddings and non-weddings and all of those types of things. But I think we need to talk now because both of us have had lots and lots of requests and concerns from people who are talking about loss, which in itself is love, and how they haven't been able to do proper farewells because of the pandemic, how they were forced perhaps into a direct cremation without having any choice over it, how they not only have they had to not say goodbye at the funeral or the direct cremation, they haven't been able to see their loved one on the run up to whilst they were dying, and they are suffering a lot from lack of closure, and all the emotions that come with that. You can hear in people's voices that the grief, the regret, the guilt, the rage, the unsettled feelings that they have, and I think that with all the questions that both of us have had, that's raised a lot of questions, because we see a lot now of adverts on the TV for direct cremations and suggesting that old people are a burden, so to stop being a burden they should have a direct cremation. And so the idea of direct cremations potentially can be seen in a money saving or a negative connotation, but there are ways that you can incorporate a direct cremation and have a respectful farewell reflection on a person's life. And I think there's a lot of confusion there, and we need to talk about that some more and try
Absolutely.
and clarify that. It's
really I think you're right, Bernie. I would say for every conversation I'm having at the moment with a couple talking about wanting to celebrate, I'm having 2 or 3 conversations with just people I know or in my community who don't know where to take their grief, who've been carrying it, some of them for 2.5 years. And you said that word, guilt. Guilt is one of those things we carry through life, isn't it? It's such a burden. That's where the word burden is appropriate, not when we're talking about those we love. No. And you're right, we definitely are going to talk about that. I can see us having to do at least another conversation on this one. I would love people to understand that you coming to the end of your life and people marking that is not actually just about you. This idea that somehow you are a burden by wanting a ceremony, what you allow your family and your friends to do is to say to others, this person had a massive impact on my life. I loved this person, and therefore I will grieve their loss. Now, that's not a burden. That's an acknowledgement of a lifelong gift that you gave us. If we don't grieve you, maybe we didn't love you. So give us the chance to grieve you. Give us the chance to say, this service, this ceremony, whatever we're going to call it, yes, it's to say this person needed some kind of acknowledgement, but actually what it's really there for is to give me some comfort and to think about my future too, because endings are also beginnings.
Absolutely. And endings are so important, closing doors on chapters or changing the way, framing that section of your life in a more positive way as a closure. Because when you lose someone you love, or have cared about, who has had an influence in your life, and the ripples that people have in their lives go way beyond what they believe. None of us realize the impact we have on other people's lives, hopefully in very positive, sometimes very small, sometimes very massive ways. But there are lots of people who are influenced by everybody who passes, and if you've loved and had the honor of being part of that person's journey, they may have, for whatever reason, they may genuinely want to have a no fuss direct cremation or a small cremation, or they may have, their family may have been pushed into that because of the pandemic or circumstances where they weren't allowed to see them, or in either instance, that might not be the way that the family help, the way that the family can respond to their grief properly, which is what I know that's what you were saying. But I mean, coupled with the fact that during the pandemic, families didn't get to see their loved ones the way they want to, or support them through the dying process, and if they were ill, they didn't get to do their final goodbyes or share their last stories or reiterate in the way they wanted perhaps how much they loved them. And I'm sure their loved ones knew, but as an individual, not having been able to do those things that are normal human processes, we have these rituals and processes and needs in our lives for a reason, and if that is thrown into disarray, what happens is the recovery. And when I talk recovery, I don't mean the forgetting about and getting on with your life.
Absolutely.
I mean the acceptance and the molding that those memories and those lessons and those images into your future so that can move forward in a healthy way. If you haven't been able to do that, then you are going to be tainting everything that you're trying to do in the future. So I mean, not everybody wants to go back and revisit their grief and their guilt, but sometimes I think going back after a period of time, be that because we now can, or because we feel we've had time to reflect and think and create something alongside a direct cremation, or instead of, or as well as a full-on celebration that you had at the time, is a really good thing to do to move you forward another step.
Yeah, and I love that you say to move you forward. You know that as well as being a celebrant for many years, in fact, for far longer than being a celebrant, I've been coaching. And as coaches, we're very focused on future. Therapists look at your past, coaches help you look at your future. Mm-hmm. And I believe one of the things that we can do for people is say, you know what, we realize there was a future here that you didn't see. Mm-hmm. When you pictured your future, it included that person you lost. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we can do now is we can tell that person, let's have a ceremony to say, this is what's happened. We wish you had been here to be part of it. Mm-hmm. And we're going to share it and talk about what's happened in the last couple of years in a way that allows us to say, without you, we have survived. It has not been what we imagined. And yet somehow each day, one foot has been planted in front of the other. It takes such great courage. What people have achieved by getting this far needs to be seen and heard and acknowledged, because then that big weight of guilt and grief can be left where it is. And nobody ever should suggest you get over. I don't believe you should get over the loss of someone you loved. They will always pull on a heartstring. There will always be a tear at a certain memory because of how much joy and love they brought you. And it's worth that. Yes, it hurts, and it's worth it. What changes is you actually begin to see your life and the life of the other people involved in your family and your friend group, in your community, will go on, and so will you.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of the grief process that many people have been denied in the last couple of years.
And I think it's much harder to not feel guilty about getting on if you haven't said, I miss you, I'm sorry for these things I didn't say, I want to thank you for these things that you did for me, you know. And if you feel like you've got that hole and then you've just got on, then at some point, not always, and it's fine if it doesn't for you, you know, but for some people that will come and bite you in the bum, and you know, who psychologically, I imagine, and I am seeing evidence of a lot of post-traumatic stress as a result of COVID and the way that we were forced to isolate from each other, and particularly in those isolations that haven't had the opportunity to regroup again because of a bereavement. And I think that by saying now or next year or on a birthday or an anniversary, hey, let's get together in a small way, in a way where, in a place that really mattered or reflects what we're doing, and just gather a few people, with the ashes, without the ashes, with some photos of that person, you know, with their bike, with their car, with their whatever it is that is the image, and maybe include a celebrant or a minister if you're religious, or whatever you want to do, and get together and create something that gives you the opportunity to cry, to celebrate, to remember, to reflect, to apologize if that's what you feel you need to do, you know, or to say thank you. And I think however that is, that could be a party, that could be a very solemn thing, but to do it purely in a way that reflects what you need to say, without judgment, without anything, and with the help of somebody. And obviously I'm going to say celebrant because we are, and that, but it's not expensive to use a celebrant. If anyone's worried about cost, we're not talking the full costs that they talk about with funerals. You can have a beautiful memorial for a few £100 with a celebrant, and it can be exactly everything that you want it to be, and include all of the imagery and objects and words that you want it to include. And I just really think that some of us need that. A lot of, well, I know because we keep having questions about it from people who, you know, I'm doing something with a family in a few weeks, and it's a year since their dad, partner, you know, husband passed away. And whilst they did manage to have a small funeral at a crematorium and a small wake, they just need something else. So we're going somewhere that was really important to them in relation to their classic cars and this, that, and the other. And we're going to scatter some ashes and say a few things and have a few drinks and do something very informal, but bookmark it and say a few of the things they weren't ready to say then, or, you know, or didn't feel then but feel now, and they want to voice that in a more in a reflective way, and in a gratitude, a way of gratitude for that person and the influence they've had on their lives.
I love one of the things you said there is another thing I think that hits a lot of us at different times and in different ways. And I think it's really important at this point to say grief is different for each and every one of us, and can be different each time we experience it. I lost my mum just before Christmas, and we had been estranged for many years. And I was very surprised by how the grief hit me. A bit like walking into a brick wall, to be honest. It was a full-on smack in the body I did not expect. And the message I gave myself was, it's okay to feel different here. Every time you feel grief, it's going to feel different. you know, there's no rule book with it, but what there is for each of us is a process. And not allowing ourselves to go through it merely prolongs that process. One of the things I encourage people to do at the moment, because not everyone's going to be in a position, obviously, where they can talk with a minister or a celebrant or even a friend about it. If you are carrying it and you're very aware that you're carrying it, there are a few things that will really help you to start processing that. And one thing that many people find helpful is writing it down. You hear lots of people talk about journaling. And I know when I first heard about it, because I don't like being strictly put in boxes and told you do this, followed by this, followed by this, I instantly rebel. And as soon as somebody said, and you must do it first thing in the morning, I wanted to throw my journal in the bin. So I would say you do it whenever you want. And if you don't do it one day, you don't beat yourself with your journal for not doing it. You just do it when you want. But picking a book that you know is yours, that nobody else touches, that feels secure, is a very comforting thing to have. I also have an electronic document that I kind of brain dump in when I feel my grief building and I need to put it somewhere. I know of a beautiful thing that's happening with a group of women I know who all lost a partner during COVID, and they send each other notes of joy. Because they all knew each other's partners, they remind each other, and it again is totally spontaneous. So it's not, we must do this on a Friday. It's, I was gardening today and Roy popped in my head. And so I thought I'd tell you about a conversation I had with him because Roy was your partner. And this beautiful story chain that they've created, many of them have said, I hadn't heard half of these stories before.
That's so lovely. Oh my gosh.
Isn't that beautiful? I mean, I got completely goosebumpy about this. And they've said it's a tremendous support in their own grief, because as they're writing about the partner of a friend, of course, they are also thinking about the partner they lost. And it's helped them to express that. So I encourage anybody who thinks, yes, that might work for me, pick up a pen or a pencil or type it. And it does, there's no rule here. You just write what you want to. But writing it down can really help.
Or I mean, if you're not a writer and that you're feeling very conscious of that, you can vocalize it. You can vocalize it that by recording it, or just stand somewhere and say it out loud.
Yes. And the out loud bit's the important bit.
The out loud bit is the really important bit, because I always find, I mean, whatever I do, if I'm thinking internally, I don't know, think of a quiz or a crossword. I think of a crossword clue and I'm reading it and I can't get the answer. But when I say it out loud,
suddenly there it is.
There it is. And it just makes a difference. I mean, personally, I have a very pretty notebook and I have it everywhere with me. And every now and again, probably ironing usually is my thing. And a memory or something will pop up, or a thought or a piece of angst or grief will pop up, and I will write something down, or I'll see a poem or I'll feel a two-liner that's really shit, but it's mine. It will come into my head in relation to that person, and I will write it down. These are not things I will probably ever share with anyone, but the act of transferring it from here in my mind to through my body, through my fingers to the outside world, be it by vocalizing or getting it on a pen and paper, that kind of is a cathartic exercise. And
of course, I know another thing that you do, and probably most creative people do, is you go and create things. So your art is a wonderful way for you to express emotion where you don't have to vocalize or put an actual word to it. And that would have been another thing I would recommend. You know, people use the word therapy and we all curl up instantly and I don't need therapy, I'm tough. But art therapy is totally spontaneous. It can be as simple as going for a walk with a pad and some paints in your rucksack, and just seeing something that inspires you to say, I want to create something on paper that makes me think of this. I know that discovering art and realizing we really all can do art was a magical moment for me, and it's helped me enormously with mental wellness. When I feel burdened or a bit overwhelmed at work, I go and sit in the woods and draw. I have the wonderful Amanda Rose to thank for that.
Yes,
and you know, spiritually, it kind of frees me, because I don't have to show anybody my art. I'm not doing it for a project or an exhibition. I'm doing it to express something I'm holding inside. And it is very releasing and no longer a burden. There's that word again.
And it slows your mind down, it stills your mind, and you're focusing on one thing. So I think there are all sorts of, you know, anything that kind of puts you in that kind of still and meditative state where you can just let your mind and thoughts flow. You know, for some people that's baking, some it's digging in the garden, some it's going for a run. You know, all of those things therapeutically help with grief. But I think that the outward expression is the key. Is you know, you can keep reflecting and mulling things over in your mind, and you can keep holding things in, and you can review your regret, or you can review your grief, and you can review your loss in your mind. But getting it out of your mind and into some other form is the answer. You know, and it's not, you know, it's not a one-time solution, which is why I'm suggesting to people who, even those who have had the farewell they thought they wanted for someone, or had the farewell that person want and honored them in the way they wanted, there may be a time down the line where they think, I wish I'd been able to say this, do this. I really want to remember and reflect on this person in this way. That's really important to me. And I would need to do it more than just now. I want to, you know, I really need to do this to move to the next step and you know, and move that into a moment. And that might be, I mean, for some people, because I began by talking about how we'd been talking about weddings and love and celebrations there. Sometimes when you're doing a vow renewal or a wedding or any of those services that we do, taking a moment within those for reflection for the people who aren't with you is another opportunity to remember and reflect on the influence those people and impact those people had on your life. So you know, it doesn't have to be in isolation, it doesn't have to be a special separate thing. It could be combined with something else. So if you have gone through that grief of the last 2 years because you've lost someone during COVID, and you are now moving forward and celebrating something else, within that something else you can have moments of take some time out and have like a mini remembrance and service within that to kind of, I don't know, gain permission to be happy to have the one that you're doing, or to tell the person, thank the person for being the person they were that helped you be the person you are, you know, and all of those things. I just don't think it ever needs to be a one-off, one-time goodbye when you
I agree. And on that note also, I would say, you know, to anybody who's listening, who is the friend of or family member to someone who has been grieving, please, you know, really heartfelt request here, don't ever talk to them about how long it's been, and that, you know, perhaps by now you should be feeling. The word should and grief do not belong in the same sentence. And grief on many levels never goes away. It just behaves differently. It's like it becomes slightly less of a priority, but it will always hurt on some level when people think about those they have loved and lost. And when well-meaningly, obviously, and not always, but yes, mostly well-meaning people will say things like, oh, come on, you know, it's been a couple of years now. It's one of the most negative ways you can reinforce all the things people are already telling themselves. They are already saying, I should have moved on, I should be over this, I should be able to get out of bed and put my clothes on today without crying. So don't reinforce that.
No.
Sometimes the best thing you can do is sit and say nothing, but do the sitting. We as a society, particularly here, I think in the UK, are not taught how to deal with grief, particularly other people's. So we get a bit uncomfortable and we feel awkward. I remember somebody saying to me after my accident many years ago, when of course I was grieving my previous life, I asked a friend who I'd had most of my life, who's in the year following my accident didn't come to see me. And I said, why didn't you come? I don't get it. And she said, I just found it too hard. I didn't know what to say. And I looked at her and said, don't you think I was finding it even harder? Because no matter
really...
how awkward or difficult you feel, they're feeling worse. And you don't have to solve it. You are not there to fix this. All you need to do is sit and listen.
Yeah, there's two phrases that come to mind when you say that, Diana, that about sitting and listening. One is to be present and available.
Yes.
And the other is to hold space.
Oh,
You're
yes.
just holding space for that person and saying, look, we don't have to talk about it. I haven't forgotten about it either. The space is here whenever you need it.
Yeah.
You know, be that.
That's such a gift, isn't it?
Yeah. It doesn't have to be full of conversation. It doesn't have to be talking about the person and the grief that you're having, but it can be with the knowledge that that is there, and you can be doing something completely different, but holding space for somebody is really important.
It's huge. I learned that on a really big scale in the last 10 days. We lost our little dog, who was 16 years old, and he was my hubby's total shadow. From the day we got him, he went to work with John every day. And John and I grieve in very different ways. And I have held the space for 10 days by going into the garden and starting a new project with John. And every day we have walked past the place where we've buried Branston, which is now covered in daffodils and looks exquisitely beautiful under an oak tree, which he would have loved because it's got the view of both gates. He could have seen people, who's coming, who's going, what's happening. And we haven't mentioned him. And every time we've walked past him, John's reached out and taken hold of my hand and just squeezed. And I've squeezed back. And then we have spent most of the day talking about plans and digging ditches. And I've been supervising, obviously. And that's how he needed me to hold the space. So it doesn't have to involve conversation about the loss. It just says, I see you. I see your pain. And I'm here when and if you need me to be.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head, Dinah. And also I think that needs to be the subject for our next episode. I think we need to talk about how people can grieve over their four-legged companions as deeply as human companions, and how because people often feel guilty about that. So I think we need a whole episode of that, because you with Branston, I think we need to reflect on Branston. He deserves that time. But also I have had friends who I've done ceremonies for, and and for their four-legged companions. And I think we need to talk some more about that, and how it's not in any way diminishing the value of human companionship, and how it's not ridiculous, because some people feel like they're being silly. So let's have that conversation.
I think that would be lovely. Thank you. And may I also say, what was so wonderful for me while I was holding space for John was the constant little messages popping up from you that were saying, I know what you're going through and I am holding space if you need it. So thank you, Bernie.
Always there, Dinah. I love you.
I saw you, so thank you. I love you too. And thank you everybody for today. It's a difficult and challenging topic, but it's also something we do need to talk more about. And I know Bernie and I would both say, so I speak for both of us, if you've been listening today and this has brought up something for you that you need to reach out and talk about, we are always here to listen. But don't stop yourself reaching out to your friends and your loved ones. They may not reach out because they don't know how, or they're worried they will say the wrong thing. It doesn't mean they don't care. They just need some instruction. So give them some. Tell them, I need to talk. I need a coffee. Let's do cake. I don't need to talk, but I need you to be around. Let them know, and you'll be surprised how quickly they do step up.
Yeah, that is so true. And maybe they will say the wrong thing, but tell them, say that that's not what I need to hear. Don't be embarrassed. Just they're your friends, they're your family. They want desperately to relieve some of the pain you're feeling, and they just don't know how. So let them tell them.
Yes,
thanks,
absolutely.
Diana.
Thanks, everybody. We look forward to next month already.
Yeah.
Ask a Celebrant is unscripted, and we base it on the questions we receive from our clients and you, our listeners. We'd love to hear from you. Do join the conversation.
See you next month.